Canadian-American series called The Hardy Boys. Yeah, I loved
we
The
know
Hardy
them.
Boys.
Yeah, The Hardy Boys.
I loved Frank, who was the older, dark-haired, studious Hardy boy. His younger brother Joe was sporty and blonde, and even at that age, I distrusted blondes.
I still do.
Yeah, I'm not going to look around to see whom I've offended. But probably I'll just, And then as a teenager, I dove headfirst into what we now term psychological suspense, as written, indeed as pioneered by Patricia Highsmith, who wrote The Talented Mr. Ripley and Strangers on a Train. As a graduate student at Oxford, I focused on Highsmith and on psychological suspense more broadly, and then I launched a career in the UK publishing principally crime fiction. So I was steeped in this genre from a young age. And that was one of the formative experiences that led to this book. The other was somewhat darker. When I was 21 years old, I was diagnosed with severe clinical depression. And for the next 15 years, I resorted to pretty much every treatment imaginable in combating it, from medication to meditation, from hypnotherapy to electroconvulsive therapy to ketamine therapy to retail therapy, and nothing proved lastingly fruitful. The results were pretty negligible. And then in the summer of 2015, I found myself on my birthday talking to a Russian psychiatrist, as one does on one's birthday. It's a quaint American custom. Yes. And he grilled me for an hour and a half, and at the end of that 90 minutes said to me, "I think you've been misdiagnosed. I don't think you've got unipolar depression. I think you've got bipolar disorder." And I argued with him, because I'm argumentative by nature. I said, I've seen Homeland, and I've never gone full Carrie, but it looks awesome. And he said, no, there are variants of bipolar disorder. I think you've got bipolar 2, wherein the highs are not so dizzying or manic, but the lows are lower and more enduring. So we're going to take you off your old meds, and we're going to put you on some new ones and see how she flies. And I'd undergone this process before switching meds. It usually lasts about 6 weeks. It's unpleasant. I always feel like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk. That's my impression of the Hulk. Watch out, Mark Ruffalo. And yet it became apparent about 4 weeks into this transition that this was the correct diagnosis and the correct medication. And so I'd spent the previous 4 weeks camped on my sofa watching old films. I've got this nigh autistic ability to rewatch old films and reread old books ad nauseum. And whilst parked on the sofa, I clock a light in my peripheral vision. It's my neighbor across the street in Manhattan, switching on her living room lamp. And in accordance with fine New York City custom, I spy on her. You would too.
I would too.
She's not doing anything particularly interesting. She settles herself in her armchair. She's aiming a remote at her TV. And on my own TV behind me, where Rear Window is screening, I hear Thelma Ritter chiding Jimmy Stewart. She says, I'm paraphrasing, "I can smell trouble right here in this apartment. You look out your window, you spy on your neighbors, that's trouble." And I think to myself, how funny, 61 years on, I'm doing the exact same thing he did. Voyeurism dies hard. And I think voyeurism is a primal human instinct, because we are programmed to feel curious about our environment and those who inhabit it. And just like that, this story took root and rapidly took shape in my mind, and approaching it from another corner of that mind was this heroine who had experienced much of what I had experienced. She was struggling as I had very recently struggled. And I wanted to explore what I'd been through and what she was going through at a safe remove. And that's one of the beautiful aspects, as I've discovered, of writing fiction. Just as reading is an act of empathy, it's a way for us to experience vicariously other people's lives, it turns out writing serves much the same purpose. And within 48 hours, I'd prepared a 7,500-word outline. I sent it to an agent friend of mine who'd encouraged me to proceed, and a year later, the book was on submission.
That's great. And so